Welcome to A Writer's War, a National Lottery Heritage Fund First World War Centenary project, produced by Chrome Radio for the University of Oxford's Faculty of Medieval and Modern Languages, in partnership with Year 10 students from Oxford Spires Academy. The university organised a series of workshops for the students, looking at responses of British, French and German writers to the First World War. This is the last of 4 podcasts in which we hear from the students. In Memoriam.
I'm Barney. We're in Oxford Spires Academy. Doing these workshops has made the past wars feel much closer and much more real, which actually helps to get an understanding of what war might be like now on a large scale. Because obviously there still are wars going on, but nothing quite compared to World War I or World War II. We looked at some poems about the First World War from the English point of view. We talked about how some English poets promoted it as propaganda and told people that they should go off to war. However, some saw how bad war was, and they expressed that in their poems. A poem talked about caterpillars and disgusting, horrible creatures dying all over the place. It makes you think about how terrible war can be and what can happen to people. We looked at some French poems about war. They were a lot more patriotic than the English poems. It was much more personal because the wars were being fought on their territory. The English, it was over the seas, it was away from them. We went down to Magdalen College and we looked at some old documents and letters from that sort of era. A couple of letters were passed around. One of them was written in the trenches. You could tell it was very messy because it had been written with a pencil on a piece of paper, probably over someone's knee. There was another letter passed around that was from someone else in that same time. You could see the contrast between them, how neat and fine one of them was, written in ink, and the contrast to the messy, scrawled about writing in a pencil on the other letter. We wrote poems about if a war happened now, what it might be like. We had to think about the bad things of war and the good things about peace that we would miss. With all the political tension that seems to be going around at the moment, if there was a war, I imagine it to be nuclear and probably wouldn't last very long. The never-missing nukes flying back down to Earth. The changed children, never the same again. The fiery skies lit up with anger. Anger against the war. Anger against the bombs. Anger against the radiation changing the lives of the next generation. And the next. And the next. However, we are still waiting to play footy in the park. Waiting to hang out in town with my friends. Waiting for the day to come when it's all over and we get to return to how we began. But inside we know we can never be the same.
Grinding guns load grunting coldly, a missile screams and so the blood-soaked men. And the trench decay waits for its next victim. Boom. The soldiers will never know the end of this fight. They've been claimed by the Reaper too early for that. The field is painted red and littered with morbidness. The brutal murderer named war has cancelled our lives. Playing in the park, reading, meeting friends has been temporarily postponed for some. But for the unlucky, a harder blow hits them, knocking them out of their seats into the radiated air. I'm Jake, and I wrote that poem because war's not a thing that does much good for anyone, because it's mostly just fighting. I don't find it solved much, it does the opposite really. We were learning about war poems and the First World War, poems in different languages and different aspects of war. We saw loads of different perspectives. We saw very negative ones, and we saw that one sort of in between, some really glorified it as well. We went to Magdalen College to see the archives. It was interesting to see what people's lives were like then and how people kept diaries over time.
My name is Fatma, I'm 15 years old and I go to Oxford Spires Academy. I'm India Seal, and we've been looking at archives from Magdalen College and seeing lots of letters from people going into the trenches. And we looked at lots of poems.
This is in World War One. We've been looking at Wilfred Owen and Stadler and how the war inspired them to write their poems.
I was in the French group, and we were looking at how most women back at home had a better view on the war. Many people tried to make it better for themselves, telling themselves it was better than it actually was, whereas the women could see how bad war was and how much it affected families.
We had the German poems from Stadler, and then we looked at a passage from Remarque. It was about a teacher and how he was very strict, and there was another person who was excited for the war and he had no idea about all the consequences. When we were at Magdalen College, we saw the memorial plaque, and Stadler's was later than other people from the college. This was because he was German and they thought he was an enemy, but then later on they put him there because he was important as well.
I really liked looking at the archives in Magdalen College because it's really interesting to see the president writing letters all about the war, but then there would also be things about seeing butterflies. Life still went on. He's not really involved. He could still live his life.
You have been listening to A Writer's War. I do hope you'll join us for the next podcast in the series.